They said he rapped about death so often it sounded like prophecy. Tupac Shakur wasn't just a star, he was a storm. Every verse was a warning, every stage a battlefield, and every headline another scar. He called himself a dead man walking, long before the bullets in Las Vegas proved him right. The world saw the diamond chains, the fire, the fury. What they didn't see were the shadows following him, the betrayals, the blood feuds, the secrets he carried like loaded guns. This isn't just the story of a rapper. This is the untold truth of a man who knew fame was killing him and couldn't escape it.
Tupac Amaru Shakur was born in 1971, not in a mansion or under studio lights, but into a world already marked by struggle. His mother, Afeni Shakur, was a Black Panther activist under FBI surveillance. His childhood was shaped not by fairy tales, but by police raids, poverty, and the constant reminder that the system was stacked against him. Even his name carried rebellion, Tupac Amaru, after the Incan revolutionary executed for defying empire. Growing up in New York, then Baltimore, and later California, Tupac learned early how to wear masks. The student with promise, the street poet, the young man burning with anger. At the Baltimore School for the Arts, he studied Shakespeare and ballet, yet carried notebooks filled with verses about police brutality and survival. Teachers said he was magnetic, that even then he seemed destined for something larger. But no one could imagine how that magnetism would both lift him to stardom and draw him into danger. By the time he moved to Oakland and found his place in hip-hop, Tupac was already a contradiction, an artist who quoted Machiavelli and read poetry, but also a fighter who couldn't walk away from conflict. He was hungry, not just for fame, but for truth, and for a platform that could amplify the rage of an entire generation left voiceless. The stage was set. In an industry dominated by flash and bravado, Tupac would emerge not just as another rapper, but as the one who blurred the line between prophecy and performance. Every verse was a mirror of the life he lived, and the life he knew could be taken from him at any moment.
Tupac's rise was meteoric, the kind of ascent that felt unstoppable. His first major role in the 1992 film Juice made him a face Hollywood couldn't ignore. Intense, magnetic, impossible to look away from. In music, his debut album Tupacalypse Now drew fire from politicians who accused him of glorifying violence. But for those who lived the life he described, Tupac wasn't exaggerating, he was translating reality. By the mid-90s, his records were selling in the millions. He wasn't just an artist, he was a voice for the unheard, a symbol of resistance for Black America. Yet with fame came enemies, and Tupac seemed to attract both with equal force. Arrests, lawsuits, and violent altercations piled up as fast as the hit records. The industry loved the controversy, it sold records, but it also marked him as dangerous. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry, stoked by media and fueled by pride, dragged Tupac into a storm bigger than any one artist. His friendship with the notorious B.I.G. turned into one of the most infamous feuds in music history, a public fracture that blurred into gang wars and left bodies on the pavement. Prison followed, an 11-month sentence that seemed to confirm the worst headlines about him. For many, it looked like the fall had begun. But even behind bars, Tupac refused silence. He wrote, he plotted, and when Suge Knight and Death Row Records bailed him out, he returned to the world with an intensity even more dangerous than before. The stage lights burned brighter, the verses cut sharper, and the sense of inevitability, the feeling that he was sprinting toward a violent end, grew impossible to ignore. He was rising higher, selling millions, dominating headlines. But every step up the ladder came with another crack beneath his feet, the weight of fame pulling him closer to collapse. The darkest truth about Tupac Shakur is that he seemed to live inside a prophecy of his own making. He rapped about dying young, about enemies in the shadows, and about betrayal, and each verse became a chilling foreshadowing of his reality. In interviews, he admitted he felt marked, that death was stalking him. He once said, "I feel like I'm already dead. I have nothing to lose by saying what's on my mind." But behind the bravado was a man unraveling. Years of police harassment, courtrooms, and media sensationalism painted him as a menace, while those close to him saw someone overwhelmed by paranoia and exhaustion. He was trapped in a cycle. Every scandal fed the image, every headline deepened the myth, and every bullet fired around him felt like a countdown. The East Coast-West Coast feud turned his life into a battleground. Friends became enemies, and enemies became executioners. The world saw him as fearless, but the truth was more tragic. Tupac was cornered, surrounded by violence he could not escape. He carried betrayal like a scar, mistrusting everyone, even those closest to him. And then came Las Vegas, September 7th, 1996. A drive-by shooting, 4 bullets. At just 25 years old, Tupac Shakur was pronounced dead. To his fans, it was unthinkable, yet to Tupac himself, it was almost expected. He had been telling us for years. The dark truth is this: Tupac didn't just die in Las Vegas. He died slowly, piece by piece, with every betrayal, every feud, and every night he looked over his shoulder. By the time the shots rang out, his fate had already been written in his lyrics.
At Hidden Fame, we see Tupac Shakur as more than a rapper, more than a headline, more than the poster child of a feud that ended in gunfire. To us, he is the ultimate paradox of fame, a young man whose genius and voice lifted him above the streets, yet whose demons and circumstances dragged him back down into them. Tupac's story is not just about music, it's about the cost of being a prophet in a world that does not want to hear the truth. His lyrics gave voice to an entire generation that felt invisible. He rapped about poverty, racism, police brutality, and survival, not because it sold records, but because it was the life he knew. That raw honesty made him a legend, but it also made him a target. The tragedy is that Tupac became both the messenger and the message. His authenticity, his refusal to censor himself, created a myth so powerful that people still debate whether he's alive decades after his death. But behind the myth was a man, young, brilliant, but exhausted, a man who carried more than one life should. And here lies the question: did fame save Tupac, or did it kill him? Without the spotlight, he might never have been heard, but with it, he burned too brightly, too quickly, consumed by an industry and a culture that thrived on his chaos. Our opinion is this: Tupac should not be remembered only for his death, nor only for his music. He should be remembered for the uncomfortable truths he forced into the light, the vulnerability behind his rage, and the way he turned his own destruction into poetry. He was both warning and mirror, showing us that fame can immortalize, but it can also destroy before it saves. What do you think? Was Tupac destined for tragedy, or was he betrayed by the world that claimed to love him?
In the end, Tupac Shakur's story is more than a chapter in hip-hop history. It is a reminder of how fragile brilliance can be. He lived only 25 years, yet in that short time he left behind more verses, more fire, and more questions than most artists do in a lifetime. His music still plays, his words still echo, and his ghost still lingers in every conversation about fame, violence, and survival. Some remember him as the thug, others as the poet. Some call him a prophet, others dismiss him as a rebel who burned too fast. But for millions, Tupac was the first voice that spoke the truth they were living, unfiltered and unapologetic. And that is why his presence has never really died. His face appears on murals across cities, his name resurfaces in conspiracy theories, and his verses are quoted like scripture. To this day, fans whisper that he is still alive, watching from the shadows, waiting to return. Perhaps it is just wishful thinking. Or perhaps Tupac has become larger than life, too powerful for death to silence completely. Some stories are remembered for their fame, others for their tragedy. Tupac's is remembered for both, a legend carved from pain, a voice that refused to be silenced, and a destiny that proved as haunting as his own lyrics. Some stories were never meant to be known, but now you know.